So this video is about why CLG is going to win the World Championships. So welcome to Mind Games TV, episode 26, Korea versus the West. So in a number of private and public conversations recently, I've talked about how I think CLG has a pretty good shot for winning Worlds. And in fact, I firmly believe they're going to, which, is a really strong prediction. And you can't really win hard with predictions unless you're going to fail hard with predictions. So I'm okay with the flack that's going to come from this or not. But what today's video is about is really a debate about Korea versus the West, which is kind of a theme for this year's League of Legends World Championships. And I want to explain a little bit about what's going on so that people understand why it is that Korea has traditionally been strong and why that stronghold is slipping a little bit. So a little bit of my background first. I've coached and participated in sport in Japan. Japan and Korea have very similar societal structures, very similar language, grammatically speaking, like the underpinnings. There are a lot of cognates, like when I travel in Korea, I can kind of hear and understand sentences in a way because some of the words are just like the exact same word. And the grammatical structure is almost identical, which leads to some fun, you can basically write in Japanese and it will translate it into Korean in some of these like online chat programs, and you can talk with Koreans back and forth, like using them, because it's a really straightforward translation. So, okay, that was a little bit of an aside, but anyway, my background is in Japan, but Japan and Korea have very similar sports and business structures. So that's what I'm basing this on, from my observation. All right. So the thing about sport in Japan and in Korea is that it is very mastery focused, has a linear progression, is mentorship driven, and is a lifelong approach. And this is true in business as well as in sport, in fact, and also in their hobbies, just in general. So let me talk through each of these points. First of all, mastery focus. So there's two sources of motivation for competition. One of them is competitive drive, meaning the desire to best somebody else, and the other one is mastery drive, which is the desire to be better than yourself when you woke up this morning. And the culture, just the traditional cultures within a group, when you get into a group in Japan, it's very much pushed towards mastery focus, to try to always improve yourself, because there is this clear understanding that there are stages that you should go through in progression, and that trying to compare yourself to somebody else's can sometimes be really unhealthy. And also, it doesn't lead to you to train if the other person is not there. So mastery focus, the thing that is celebrated in, you'll see in a lot of anime and stuff like this, is the aspiration to be better than yourself. And once you become the best version of yourself, then, you hopefully are the best. Now, the second one, linear progression, going through the proper stages. So it's really important in Japanese groups, when I've been in them and when I've coached them and when I've seen them coached, that everybody goes through their proper roles. So you become a newbie on a team, then there's this progression towards, starter, and then there's the progression towards captain or mentor, and then towards assistant coach, and then towards coach, and then towards coach advisor, and then administration. So there's this linear progression through basically any sort of skill set development or whatever, and you're not allowed to tackle a higher skill until you've finished a previous one, or vice versa with positions. It's really hard in Japan, I found, to get into the middle of a rung on a ladder. You have to kind of climb up from the bottom. And going along with this is this mentorship approach. So we have the senpai-kohai relationship in Korea. I believe the terms are different, but it's a very similar concept, where you basically are always being mentored by the people right above you, and you're mentoring the people below you. And this is one of the reasons that in a lot of videos I've talked about how Loco Doco came in very, when he came into the coaching scene, coaching TSM, he came in with a very strong fundamental background in mentorship, because of his life in Korea, and that gave him an edge over many other Western coaches, because he had mentored other humans before. He had taught them how to learn. He had taken them through skill growth, and he'd dealt with their emotional state. So these are kind of the essential skills you need to have as a coach. And because he had gone through that experience, the culture kind of prepares you for that. I don't want to say culture because I don't believe in national culture, but the group culture that he was in, or the family cultures, various rule sets that he followed like prepared him for that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this lifelong approach. I've seen over and over again in Japan when an industry pops up that it's not acceptable for it to be temporary, and it's not acceptable for it to not have progression. And I think that if you think of things like karate, where they have these like, the white, yellow, green belt, ichidan, like black belt, and then you keep going. If you think of school, where you have like, the grades through school and then goes into business, their business culture is very similar to that. You basically like you work your way up through something, and there's always something else afterwards. Even with like sumo wrestling, for example, you go and you be a sumo, then you can go and be a coach, and then you can be a stable owner, and these kind of things, and you kind of but there's always a place for you in the progression. And most of the industries that I've seen do not like it when there's nowhere to go to step up. They think that it's not good motivation if you have nowhere to aspire to. And so if you look at the structure, how it developed in Korea, it was very clear that there were new players, and then experienced players, and then assistant coaches, and then head coaches, and then administration, and the progression goes that way, all the way up to like announcers and things like that. So what that means is right out of the gate, when you have a new thing forming like esport, you have this fantastic structure for training, right? Because just the natural way that the group is set up in Japan lends to having strong mentorship, a bunch of people who have strong, social and emotional skills, coaching for other athletes. Everybody wants to see the progression. People have to pay their dues. They respect people above them, and it leads to an incredibly good environment for training. So that is why traditionally in esport, Eastern teams have had an edge in the sports that have like institutionalized in Korea. Now, if you look at sport in general, Western sports typically, like Western teams typically have edges in pretty much all sport except baseball. And even in baseball, where Japan and Korea like absolutely professionalized it, and like everybody plays baseball and they play from the age of like 5 and they like dedicate their whole lives to it, they still will lose to Western teams, American teams. So what's the deal here? Well, once you have a structure built up, so once there is a structure assembled in the West, what we have is this competitive drive that places a couple different, like shifts priorities around. So in Korea, people will rarely place morality behind money in terms of decision-making process. Whereas in Western sport, money basically will trump many things, which leads to a willingness to, for example, fire people for having no results and just hiring somebody else, which is something that like throwing people out to the wolves in Korea is just not done as much. So if you paid your dues, if you were a newbie player and you paid your dues and you were a really good, senior player and you paid your dues and you were a really good assistant coach and you paid your dues and then you're a really good head coach and you have a failure, they're not going to fire you and chuck you out on the street to do nothing, right? They might move you to a less important position or something like that. But like in the West, we have no morality built up around these things, this loyalty concept. We have no problem just being like, done. Okay? So we're not risk averse also. And I'm saying you and we, and I really hate this now that I'm kind of saying it. So let me change it, because it's not national culture, it's group culture and group like processes. And when I say group processes, I mean that typically groups in more Western sports are less risk averse, because we kind of grew up from player driven and we weren't top down oriented. And when we are top down oriented, we have like single owners, like look at Enemy or TSM or whatever. We don't have like Samsung owning us, these big companies that are very risk averse. Okay, we have very light and nimble ownership. So we are incredibly risky. And another tradition that I've seen in groups in the West is the guru spin-off idea. So it's harder for teams, it's harder for people to spin off of gurus in Japan, for example. Like a guru is pretty cemented. When I was joining, the clubs I was joining in Japan, when I was working with the baseball team. Like the guru could withstand multiple failures, could raise up many different people through the organization and have very little competition with his or her ideas. Whereas in cultures where in groups that I've experienced here in sports in the West, where something starts failing, like immediately people will take everything that was good from that, run off and create their own kind of camp or philosophy about stuff. So this leads to a much faster refinement of ideas and a much more melting pot, bubbling kind of area for pursuit of perfection, essentially. And so it's really the kind of comparison between science and tradition, where you run multiple experiments, and when it fails, you throw everything out except the good stuff and you start over, versus running the same experiment over and over again and trying to slightly refine it. Okay. Now, another edge that Korea has had is that the fact that that they have this mentorship culture and this mastery culture led to more rapid seeking of optimization and more rapid development of mental toughness with their esport athletes. But that is catching up. As we import professional coaches, trained professional coaches into teams, for example, Counterlogic Gaming, you're going to end up with mentally tough athletes who seek optimization in very traditional ways, as structured by science, as informed by coaching science. And that is going to instantly challenge the kind of jump start that Korea has had on the rest of the world in terms of pursuit of optimization in League of Legends and the mental toughness of their athletes. So those are the reasons I'm bullish on Western teams in this tournament, in this 2015 World Championships. And of course, I'm favoring CLG over C9 because I've been working with them, but also I think that just in general we're going to see a shift, in professionalization in the West that is going to kind of, unfortunately, if tradition holds true, kind of leave Korea a little bit behind in terms of how fast they're able to innovate and bring in new styles of training and new methods of training and new ways of structuring teams. Because, if you look at the growth of professionalization, there are teams now that have coaches, sports psychologists, nutritionists, all of these things that bring massive optimization that have always done that in Western sport. And in Korea, even in traditional sport now, they do not have sports psychologists. The coaches are the ones that kind of handle the nutrition. And it's, very much based on how it's accepted to eat in that sport already. So I think that I'm excited to see how things shake out, and I really think that esport in general is going to provide a fantastic new platform for international competition in Korea, a place where you're pretty much only ever competing against other Koreans until you get onto the international stage. And now it's happening more often, in esport than we can see in business and things like that. So I'm really excited for seeing both what happens in the West in this tournament and how they do, and then also kind of what happens to Korea and esport if this trend starts to shift, if they're able to adapt and kind of bring in more Western approaches to professionalization. Now, I've left China out of this a little bit, even though I've been saying East or West. I have not said East because when I was working in China, I had a very different experience than Japan and Korea. I think that China is much more similar to the United States in terms of its laissez-faire attitude towards hierarchy. So, there were 20-year-old entrepreneurs there. That would never fly in Japan. There's nobody that would listen to a 20-year-old because it's so age hierarchical. Whereas in Korea, if you have ideas and you have execution, then you have everything. And you can be a young business person, you can be a young rich person. And you see that with these teams that are just owned by, huge, just rich people, and they just go buy a team. And I think that this money and this kind of approach toward business there is it's going to be a very different kind of feeling than Korea as far as their professionalization. It's much more player centered, the same way that Western teams have been much more player centered than teams in Korea. So yeah, that is why CLG is going to win the 2015 World Championships. And although I've told some people this before, I'm going to just announce it on my. Actually, I think I've mentioned it previously in a Mind Games TV episode. I'm not sure which one, but anyway. I'm doing this on a Sunday, so I hope that you appreciate that. Normally, this is not a day where I would make videos, but I'm trying to do one every day, and I missed yesterday, which normally I'm going to take Sunday off and not Saturday off, but I decided that I'm going to take advantage of YouTube's little feature to like upload something and publish it on another day. So on Friday, I'll just try to record one video for Saturday, one extra video for Saturday, and maybe I can record 2 extra videos for Saturday and Sunday. But anyway, I just came into the office to film this today and show you my marker. Where's the mouse?